DQ Forkpa could be a huge addition to this Florida Gators 2026 defensive class.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free, both in the podcast and on YouTube. Happy Wednesday. I am Brandon Olsen. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with New York Giants on SI. And today's episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. And the Florida Gators are, look, we've got two people that are announcing their commitments today that are on the defensive side that Florida is in play in, and we are going to circle back on them, even though we've talked about them a couple times at this point. But first, we are talking about DQ Forkpa, who is not committing today, but we will get to his commitment schedule right now. But he is a 3-star on On3 and 24/7, 4-star on ESPN and Rivals, 6'2", 220-pound linebacker out of IMG, and took his official visits in order of OV to Florida, Florida State, Michigan, and Miami. And this recruitment was relatively quiet. I say relatively just compared to his, there's some kids like Preston Carey, who we don't hear anything about, who of course committed to Georgia. And there's some kids that you always get updates on of like, hey, this is who's in first, this is who's in second, this is who's in third. And it's like, hey, I'm going to do a top 6 and a top 5 and a top 4. And they just keep doing that and, constantly giving updates and changing things. And so you see all that, but DQ Forkpa is more on the quiet side where, look, he came out at certain points throughout this recruiting process and did interviews where he was like, yeah, Florida's in the lead right now, or whatever he may be saying about whatever school they're asking him about. But for the most part, this is a relatively quiet recruitment. And I will say that, again, reports came out a while back that Florida was in the lead there. And then it was quiet for a bit. And sometimes silence is a pretty good thing. And it seems that nothing has changed on that recruitment front. That, Florida is still in the lead. As at least at the time of reporting this, that we've been told, Florida is still in the lead. And Florida should feel good about this recruitment. Which initially, DQ Forkpa had said that he was planning on announcing his commitment decision in the fall at some point. I think he might have said specifically during the season, which could be different compared to, high school or college season or IMG compared to Florida season. So maybe that could be different, but that timeline has been moved up. And I think that the timeline was moved up because there were times where people thought, hey, DQ Forkpa might pop. Right throughout this process, there were times in the spring where people said, hey, DQ Forkpa might pop. He might announce that commitment. And I think that when you have that kind of feeling, it's not surprising to watch a timeline move up. I mean, a lot of the guys that Florida actually did land had commitment dates set for later in June or later in July and ended up getting the kids to announce their decisions earlier. Like Janari Carr was expected to commit, I think, on June 25th, and he ended up committing on, was it June 4th? Is that what it? June 1st, maybe even? So even then, like, there were plenty of times where Florida had kids just pop early. We've seen that happen a lot, I think, in this recruiting cycle. Or at least I feel like in 2026, we've seen it happen more where kids have a commitment date set and they move it up. And I feel like we've seen that happen, again, more this cycle than previous cycles. Maybe that's just with the kids that Florida's been targeting or whatever it may be. But DQ Forkpa, who initially planned on committing during the season, as he said, is now expected to commit on July 12th. So not this Saturday, but next Saturday. And that's kind of where we've seen quite a few targets or quite a few recruits really set their commitment date for. There's a lot, this week but it also feels like a lot of guys went, all right, you know what, the week after that, that's when I'm committing. And DQ Forkpa seems to fit in there. But I'm also interested just in linebacker recruiting in general for the Florida Gators in this 2026 recruiting class, because they've also got a target committing this Friday, I believe it is. Yeah, this Friday, July 4th, that Malik Morris, linebacker out of Lakeland, is announcing his commitment this Friday. And for many people, myself included, and I think just about every recruiting service, we look at Florida as the public lead there, and I don't think that it's been, how do I put this? I don't think that it's been secretive here that Florida had been leading for this recruitment a lot. Malik Morris is another player that we talked about. I forgot who it even was that we talked about the other day of like, hey, maybe they're going to pop on their visit. But Malik Morris was someone where, it was Kendall Gervil, who we're going to talk about in the next segment, where we said, hey, Kendall Gervil might be a long shot commit watch when he came onto campus. With Malik Morris, it didn't really feel like a long shot commit watch. It felt like, hey, if he commits, don't be surprised, right? And I don't think many people would have been surprised had he committed when he was on campus. After his official visit, he was on campus about a week ago. And again, there were people that thought, hey, he's on campus unofficially. Maybe he's going to commit again. And that didn't happen. But we got the commitment date set for July 4th. Florida has been publicly in the lead. I know that there have been people to report that I think it was On3, the Miami side, that reported that they weren't continuing their recruitment of Malik Morris right now. And I don't know if that was, hey, like not a fit, or hey, we're really far behind. So I really don't know there. But I think it was the On3 side for Miami that said, hey, yeah, Miami's not really in this like that anymore. Also important to remember that when we're talking about this linebacker recruiting class specifically for Florida, that former Florida commit Isaiah Williams, another linebacker, of course, is also a target. And I know that there are a lot of people who don't want him in the class. And frankly, I understand it. I do. I don't necessarily care. I genuinely, I just don't have much of an opinion of it, because I have felt like I've always tried to not fault kids too much for finicky, we'll say it, or we'll say finicky recruiting cycles. Just because, it's a process that I can't truly understand. And I've said this so many times, like myself, most of the people watching this will never really know what it's like to have hundreds and thousands, if not millions of people that would care about where you go to school. And so I can't really relate to that. Like I can't fault you for going, hey, hundreds of thousands of people and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like I can't really, I don't know. I just can't fault the kid too much for that. I understand the people that do. I just don't. I would say also, though, that my stance is generally Florida's still recruiting him. So my opinion of the situation doesn't really matter at all there. I am interested to know what would happen with Isaiah Williams. Let's say Malik Morris commits to Florida on Friday. DQ Forkpa is publicly, or Florida is publicly in the lead for DQ Forkpa. Is Isaiah Williams still a take at that point? Is Isaiah Williams welcome in the class still? Is he viewed as a +1, great athletic traits? I've said before, I feel like I would personally rather take Isaiah Williams as an edge rusher than as an off-ball linebacker, just because I think he has those physical traits that would translate well to the edge. But I don't think that the staff views that the same as me at all. And so now it's like, well, I don't know what they would take, but hell, I am a fan of saying, hey, well, take who you can, right? And also I think that, and I know Florida doesn't do this, but I would be of the we'll say, belief that if you take like if you've got a +1 linebacker and you take him and it's like, oh well, we got to push someone out, then say, hey, underperforming guy, head on out, go ahead, it's okay, it didn't work out here. But we'll see how Florida takes that approach, especially with Isaiah Williams as this recruiting process continues. Or if they miss out on either DQ Forkpa or Malik Morris, do they say, hey, Isaiah, let's get you in the class right now. Let's prioritize you here. So it'd be very interesting to see what happens there. But it's interesting. And Florida, again, has 2 commits or 2 recruits that are announcing their decision today of where they're committing. We're going to talk about them when we get back with Locked On Gators. You ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your investments or planning a big purchase, Monarch put you in the driver's seat. And it's like having your own personal CFO, right? Giving you full visibility, full control over your finances. And Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, all of your investments, and all of your spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building your wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year with monarchmoney.com. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free, wherever it's in the podcast and on YouTube. And we're going to talk a bit more about Kendall Gervil today. 4-star defensive lineman. He's a 4-star on all platforms, defensive lineman. 6'4", 6'5", depending on where you look. Hell, some places have him listed as 6'4.5". And I don't know if that's just them kind of going, all right, well, some places say 6'4", some say 6'5", which, you know, smack it in the middle. But 6'4", 6'5", 315 pounds. He is announcing his commitment today, July 2nd. And he's listed his teams that he's deciding between as Florida, Texas, and Florida State. But similar to what I said yesterday, Florida State has either been moving in complete silence or they're pretty much out of the picture. And I think that it's more so the latter, only because Florida and Texas haven't exactly been moving in silence, right? Reports have been coming out about Florida and Texas and their recruitment of Kendall Gervil and the NIL matters involving Kendall Gervil and who's in the lead and who's bidding more and all of that stuff. And so for me, that would make it really weird if Florida and Texas are having all of this noise around the recruitment and Florida State isn't, but that Florida State would actually be in that top conversation. It just doesn't sound likely to me, right? I'm not saying it's impossible. It's just not what sounds likely. And by the way, I'm speaking about this just matter of factly, right? Like we've heard about Florida's recruitment of Kendall Gervil. We've heard about Texas's recruitment of Kendall Gervil. We haven't heard much of anything from Florida State, especially recently. And I think that's, for me, what really does it as like, and I say this because I think it's important to acknowledge these moments, because when Cormani McLean was committing out of high school, we were like, oh yeah, we're hearing a lot about Florida. We're hearing a lot about, I think Alabama was the other school in it, and Miami was in there as well. And I remember like I had the clips go on social media, because the day of the commitment, I was talking about it with John Garcia at the time. And I went, yeah, he's deciding between the Florida Gators, the Alabama Crimson Tide, and the Miami Hurricanes, because there was almost no noise from Miami for a while. And then he ended up committing to Miami. It didn't stick, but that's beside the point. Because I'm just saying that's why I bring this up, as he said, hey, Florida, Texas, and Florida State. And so those are his schools. I'm saying that publicly, we've got nothing from Florida State. And I'm not saying that they're, irrelevant. I'm just saying that they're either moving in complete silence or they are irrelevant. And I think that it's the latter, just because we've heard so much from other kids, or from other schools. But hey, these things happen sometimes where one school just moves silently, right? It's happened before. It'll happen again. And Gervil, like I mentioned before, Kendall Gervil is someone that we spoke about as a long shot commit watch when he took his OV to campus a few weeks ago. And part of that was because we knew that Florida was really hammering that recruitment there. We knew that Florida was prioritizing him. We knew that Florida was trying to get that commitment to end that day. And so obviously it didn't happen, but this just goes to show the priority there. And I do think that I feel like this cycle, or really the past few cycles, we've seen kids kind of try to lean into the love who loves you bit. And I think Florida does a really good job of making kids feel loved. So when we talk about, love who loves you, it's like, well, this school's been recruiting me a ton. This school's been pursuing me heavily. They've been talking to me all the time. They message me. How many times have you heard or read any recruit talking about Florida and they go, yeah, Billy Napier texts me every day. Billy Napier texts my parents every day. How often have we heard that? Because I know I hear it all the time. And so I feel like as kids are really trying to lean, because look, kids are going to get paid wherever they go. You could talk about the amount that they're getting paid, sure, but they're going to get paid wherever they go. They're going to get an education wherever they go. They're going to, if they're good enough, they're going to get playing time eventually. They're going to get developed. Like it's just a matter of, where you're actually going to get more of what. Some schools, you're going to get a great development. You're not going to get much of an education. You're not going to get as much NIL, but they're going to get you to the league, and that's what's going to be important, right? And so you deal with all those things. But it does feel like a lot of kids are now leaning into, I'm going to get these things. Like I'm going to get the money. I'm going to get this playing time if I'm good enough, if I'm doing what I need to do. I'm going to get this. Which school's showing me the most love? And Florida does a really good job of doing that. And so I do think that with Kendall Gerville, like we know NIL is a factor. We've been hearing this. And it's one of the reasons that I've been saying that, hey, I know that a lot of Florida Gators reporters and all that's coming out of like, hey, Florida's in the lead here. My stance on it is still just NIL is an important factor in this recruitment. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I know that there are a lot of people who go, oh, NIL's ruining the game. NIL's this, NIL's that. I don't think it's ruining the game. I think that the system in place is horrible, but kids deserve to get paid, right? It's not as simple as, oh, but you get a free education. Because you're not performing like just a student. You're a student athlete. You're getting paid to play football. You're getting paid to do these things. And so they deserve to be paid. But I think the process around it is horrible. The system in place is horrible. But again, I digress on that. And I will say that when NIL is a factor, these things can change like that. Like how often, who was it? Oh, okay. There was a non-NIL thing that I was going to bring up. But I would have just been mistaken. I'm not trying to spread misinformation. But how often do we hear that, hey, this school came in with like a kind of last minute offer and that's why they got the commitment? So we can say that, hey, at the time of recording this late on Tuesday night, the reports are that Florida's in the lead for Kendall Gervil before he commits today. Maybe that changes. Hopefully it doesn't. I really want him in this class, and I look forward to going live if he is in this class. But these things can change last minute. Right now, Florida's in the lead. We're going to hope that they can hold on to it, and we're going to talk about a player that Florida was in the lead for when we get back with Locked On Gators. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free, wherever the podcast and on YouTube, and we will hopefully be available for you again later on today with at least the commitment of defensive lineman Kendall Gerville. I don't know about the commitment of anyone else, but we are going to wrap up today talking about a certain edge rusher that is committing today or announcing his decision today in edge rusher Trenton Henderson. And Trenton Henderson is someone that we've talked about immensely at this point, ad nauseum, really. But from Pensacola, edge rusher, 6'4", 225, 230-ish. Although I don't know how accurate those numbers really are. I'm just saying that I could see him being a little bit lighter than that. I don't think that's a big deal. But, yeah. 4-star everywhere except for 24/7, where he's a 5-star. He's committing today. And this is a recruitment that we've been talking about a lot, and we're going to continue talking about. And even if he commits elsewhere today, actually, whether or not he commits to Florida today, we are going to keep talking about this recruitment. If he commits to Florida today, we're going to keep talking about keeping him in this class. If he commits elsewhere today, then we're going to talk about Florida flipping him eventually, because that's the kind of recruitment that I think this is going to be. We hear it all the time where kids commit elsewhere and they go, yeah, Florida never stopped recruiting me. Florida just kept recruiting me. Florida kept doing this, and Florida's going to keep doing that. All right. That's the way it should be done, by the way, with how fickle kids are and how often they, take money and then they go, actually, I don't want to be here. Or how often they commit to some place and they go, actually, I'm not sure if I like how I did that. Defensive lineman Makai Boyrow in the 2024 recruiting class. He committed to Florida and then decommitted to Florida. And he eventually committed to Florida again. And I remember on my show, after he committed the second time, I was talking about it. And I was like, look, I don't know what happened because he decommitted. And then a lot of people thought Georgia would be the place he'd commit to. And then when he committed back to Florida, I was like, look, honestly, I kind of thought that Georgia was going to be the place for him just because he decommitted and went back. And I believe it was his mom left a comment there that said, hey, like, thanks for not bashing him. But it wasn't even a matter of, Georgia got him to decommit. It was that he committed. And then after a while, kind of just felt like he rushed that process. And so he wanted to decommit and re-go through the recruitment process. He just didn't want to reopen. He didn't want to reopen his commitment process or his recruitment process while it's committed to Florida. And so we see kids commit and decommit all the time. Like this is, again, like I try to emphasize a lot. This is a thing that so many of us will never know what it feels like to be on the receiving end of this. Even if you're a parent of a recruit, even if you're a handler, even if you're whatever you may be, you won't know what it's like to personally feel that. Especially when you're not, mentally mature or developed there fully. So it's just a thing that we can't really relate to for many of us, right? And I'm not going to pretend to relate to it. What I am going to say is that we've been told, I'm not going to say the dollar amount, but we've been told that NIL was a big factor here, that LSU offered an amount that Florida wasn't willing to match, which again, it's not about not having the money. It's about not being willing to match it. The money's there, right? And I know that Florida has that reputation of being, we'll say, fiscally conservative, right? With recruits and NIL and all that. I do think that part of it is right now, because I think that I forgot who it was, but there were more reports coming out that, hey, schools are now using NIL to keep kids committed, not just get them, but keep them more. And that's becoming a more prevalent thing. So that, yeah, sure, why not go, hey, commit there for now, let them pay you, and then we'll circle back to it. And I've said that I think that later on today, whenever Trenton Henderson announces his commitment, that I think he's going to commit to LSU. Okay? I will say I think Florida did a better job of recruiting him than LSU did. But I think that LSU offered him an amount of money that Florida's not willing to match, and that it's a tough amount of money to turn down. If we're being honest, like, you offer me that amount of money right now, I'll line up on the edge. I don't care. You'd be making a bad decision. But you offer me that amount of money, and I'd jump in a heartbeat. I would. I'm not going to lie to you. It's a lot of money. And if someone offered me that money and said, hey, come here and do that, we were in your top 3, like, you like us, just now we're going to give you more money than the team that's in your top 1 or top 2. And so I get it. I'm not going to harp on it. I am going to say, though, that I think he commits to LSU today. Florida's not going to back off. Florida's not going to fall completely off here. I think that they might for a little bit just not push too hard. I think that they might for a little bit prioritize other targets. But I fully believe that whenever Florida decides to circle back, they're going to. And I feel that Florida will be back right there, right at the door to land this flip eventually with Trenton Henderson. Okay? Especially if games get played and you beat them. It's tough there, right? And so I understand, the NIL aspect of it. I do. I don't blame them. But I do think that Florida will be circling back here on this one. Hopefully, at least. Or I know that they'll circle back. Hopefully, they'll be able to actually pull off the flip there. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day, we are available daily and free. We have us in the podcast and on YouTube. We'll be back at the absolute latest tomorrow, but hopefully, we'll be back a little bit later today. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with New York Giants on SI, and I'll see you all next time.